Yeah. That's a good time. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So we're starting a few minutes behind. And then another thing, too, is not a whole lot of people probably join live, but it's available for 30 days after.
Okay, good.
So it'll save. For those who don't know, I'm Katie, one of the founders of Survivors Against Distracted Driving, Addie's Miracle, TBI Advocacy, and Pedestrian Awareness. This is Elias Weiss. He is editor of In Maricopa magazine and also PR for the outreach programs. And this is Chief Mark Goodman of Maricopa Police Department. So we wanted to go live today to kind of talk about some of the issues that we're seeing with distracted driving, specifically to our own city, but also some of the things that you've seen in your career. I think from our previous live, everybody kind of knows Elias and I. Do you want to do a little bit of an introduction of yourself?
Sure, be happy to. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me on today. It's my pleasure to be here. So, as Katie mentioned, I am currently serving as the Chief of Police for the City of Maricopa Police Department. I've been here for 2 years now. Prior to coming to Maricopa, I served as a police commander at the City of Pasadena Police Department in Southern California. Pasadena is the 4th largest municipality in Los Angeles County, which has several million residents, and we were very busy in all sorts of different ways at Pasadena. You may have heard of a couple of small events that the city does every year. One of them happens to be the Rose Parade, an internationally televised event, and then a small college football game called the Rose Bowl. So tons of experience managing large events and managing traffic. I served in our traffic bureau on 2 different occasions, once as a sergeant and once as a lieutenant. And so I enjoy talking about traffic-related items and traffic safety, and that is one of the things that Maricopa residents are most concerned about. Later on today, I'll be doing my yearly report to the City Council, and you're going to see that traffic and parking issues are high on our priority list for the people who live here in Maricopa. That's some of their chief concerns. So we try to address those in a variety of different ways. We have an expanded traffic unit. We just went to 5 officers in that unit. And then our patrol division tries to do some traffic stuff as well. And we also work in collaboration with the Governor's Office of Highway Safety to use grant funding to do specific operations here in our city and sometimes regionally to try to make things safer for the road for everybody in Maricopa and the surrounding area.
I think that Rose Bowl experience paid off too. If I remember correctly, the music festival, people were getting out in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, so yeah, I brought some of my event planning experience here, and one of our first tasks was to revamp the traffic plan for the 4th of July. The 4th of July is a really unique event here in Maricopa. It starts out pretty slow at the beginning of the day, but by the time the fireworks happen, we have around 10 to 15,000 people at Copper Sky. And as you know, the parking there is somewhat limited. The parking lot it's pretty small for 15,000 people. The spaces are very tight, the lanes are very tight. And so we decided to completely revamp the traffic plan to try to deal with a mass egress from an event. The come and go events that we have, like Copa Cultural or the Maricopa event and other smaller events like concerts in the park, people tend to come and go throughout the span of the event. So we don't have any major ingress and we don't have any major egresses. 4th of July is different because we have a major egress. Everybody waits until the finale, and everybody mad dashes their cars to try to be the first one out of the parking lot. And so we cut down the egress time to just about an hour now getting out of Copper Sky, which I think is pretty good considering the number of cars we have and considering the environs that the cars have to go out of. So yeah, and we're always looking to improve upon that traffic plan. We came up with a really good traffic plan for the music festival so that people could come and go. And we did clear out the lot in record time. I'm looking forward to this year's to see how we do in terms of people coming and going and maintaining good traffic flow in the area. So yes,
Next
happening
month,
April
month
4th,
from today.
April 4th, 5th, and
starts.
6th. Shameless plug for
Now
the
you're on the cover.
for the music festival
And by the
at
way-
Copper Sky. Come on out and see it.
Yes, and tonight on inmaricopa.com we'll be able to get all the numbers from your report tonight as well. So your traffic control is great, and I guess what we're seeing a lot of the crashes and problems that people have around 347, which is not in the city, and at stoplights and traffic signals. I think the point of a traffic signal is so that you don't need a traffic cop there pointing people.
You are correct.
So clearly your traffic patterns aren't to blame. I guess what we've figured out is that a distraction is the big one. So that's kind of why we're here, right?
Yeah, we have distractions.
That's on the person. That's not on the police department. It's not on the city. It's on the person. So I guess maybe should we start there? How you can police people, but so much. But we need people to actually pay attention of their own volition. How can the police help do that?
Well, we have responsibilities as drivers to obey the rules of the road. Every one of us, when we got our driver's license, agreed to abide by the rules of the road and to drive in a safe manner. But the problem with driving, it's not really a problem, it's just a fact, is that we do it so often, we become complacent and we get used to it. And we also get impatient, and sometimes emotions come into play. People get angry sometimes at other motorists or situations that they're experiencing. Sometimes people don't budget enough time to get to their destination, and they run into traffic and become frustrated, and their driving behaviors change because of that. And so yes, there are things people can do to make sure that they're following the rules of the road and to make sure that their driving behaviors are consistent with safety. One thing I talk about is always leaving early. Katie and I both arrived here for our appointment, which was at 11 o'clock. But Katie told me when she walked in that she got here a half hour early. I was like,
That's
a half hour early? That is really good, because in the world in the world I live in, I learned that if you weren't 15 minutes early, you were late. But
in your defense, you were called out of
walked in
office.
right in our man.
But life happens. I had little kids once, and things happen, and kids running late, and you just become so harried and hurried that you end up getting into your car and you're stressed out, and maybe you don't drive, like the way you should. You're just trying to get there, but you have to get there. You have to get there safely. So sometimes take that little bit of extra time to slow down and have some good driving behavior on your way to or from your destination. Distracted driving is the reason that we're here. Katie has an amazing story involving her daughter who has made a miraculous recovery from a distracted driving incident. And I myself have experience investigating distracted driving incidents. I can think of 2 incidents that were both preventable from distracted driving, and both resulted in fatalities. And the fatality doesn't just impact the family of the person who was killed. It impacts the families of the people who are in the vehicle as well. And, otherwise, regular people are involved in these incidents. One of them involved an 18-year-old young man who was driving home from work. He wasn't intoxicated, but he was in a hurry and decided for some odd reason that it would be a great idea to watch a YouTube video while he was driving home from work. And he got distracted and ended up going through a red light and ended up killing somebody. So, those are the kind of things that can happen to almost all of us, but as I mentioned, completely preventable. He made the decision to watch a YouTube video while he was driving. That's a conscious decision that he made. You're already multitasking when you're driving. You already have divided attention. And so adding in some of those things like watching videos or sometimes listening to music at an elevated volume can be distracted. Sometimes always looking at text is distracting. Even talking on your cell phone can be distracting. Now here in the state of Arizona, we have a hands-free cell phone law, which requires you to have your cell phone in a holder, and you can connect your vehicle via Bluetooth, or if you like, you can shout into your in your phone while it's in the holder, but you're not supposed to manipulate it in any way while you're driving.
Does that include the touchscreen, Apple CarPlay, or whatever?
So great question, Elias. And back when I was a young man, I'm dating myself here. Vehicles didn't have all these things that I call infotainment systems. Your car had a steel dashboard and we didn't wear seatbelts, of course, because it was the 70s. And every car had a steel dashboard with no electronics whatsoever. And your mother's arm could defy the laws of physics simply by coming across and keeping you from slamming into the steel dash, while you came to an abrupt stop because maybe the yellow light went to red a little unexpectedly. Today's cars have so many safety features that it's almost overwhelming, but they also have all kinds of other features that are very distracting. Almost every new car nowadays has the screen. It's similar to a computer screen. Some of them have screens the size of a laptop. My daughter recently bought a Tesla, and I was shocked.
Bigger than a laptop.
I was shocked when I got in the car to look at it. The entire vehicle is controlled by this screen that is the size of a small television set. And so, yeah, great question. So manipulating your screen while driving is not unlawful. It's not necessarily recommended. I always recommend that you pay attention to driving, and if you have to manipulate something on the screen, you do so while you're stopped, perhaps at a red light, waiting for traffic. A lot of the vehicles will not allow you to manipulate anything on the screen when the vehicle's in motion.
Mm-hmm.
So I've noticed a lot of times when you're driving and you're trying to punch in an address on your GPS that's connected to your car, it won't react to that. It won't let you input an address. Some of them even give you a little message to inactive while vehicle's in motion or something like that. So yeah, those systems can be very distracting. And things that seem very benign can essentially lead to a tragedy for any one of us. And we've all looked at a text while driving, myself included. I would be lying if I told you that I've never looked at my cell phone while driving in a car. We all have. Mm-hmm. But those are decisions that can be absolutely disastrous, and it's things that we should not be doing. Even me. I have 3 kids, and I told them as soon as they got their driver's license, you shouldn't be dealing with your phone while you're driving. It's on the honor system. I trusted them to do that. None of them got into an accident that was related to a cell phone. But it's really tough. We live in a world that is just driven by technology. And, many of us are connected to our cell phones for work or for family, and important things are happening around us, and sometimes we need to react to those things. If you get a call you have to take while you're driving, please try to find a safe place to pull over and then get out of traffic and then take the call or call the person back. Those are all common sense rules that I think sometimes we forget about because we just get into such a hurry in our daily lives. So one of my goals is to make sure that doesn't happen to people. We have a duty and a responsibility to work as police officers to try to make things safer for everybody, and sometimes we do need to give out citations. Sometimes we give warnings, but other times we give citations, hit you in the pocketbook a little bit. We'll hopefully send a message to not do that, and really we're just trying to prevent a tragedy from happening out here on our roads.
If I could ask one more question. You mentioned the YouTube video. Obviously, as a police department, you have a lot of tools that you can investigate crashes. So you might, in that case, I don't know the specifics of that case, but you might have, been able to determine that this phone was turned on and that this video was playing at the moment of impact. That's good that you were able to figure that out and put that in the report. Distraction was a cause. But to your point, Chief, you mentioned how everything's kind of a distraction. I mean, you're always multitasking, even if nothing else than just looking at your surroundings, or even if you're declining a phone call, just that ringing of the phone and glancing at that infotainment, it's telling you who's calling. Even if you're not going to touch it, you're looking at it, you're thinking about it. So would you say that, when you're reporting crashes or when you're responding to crashes and you're looking at causes, that a lot of times distraction might be at least a contributing factor, but it never actually shows up in the report. I guess ergo, the number of distracted driving crashes is actually higher than what's reported. What is that true?
I think that's probably, anecdotally speaking, I think that's probably somewhat true. You know, it is difficult to capture data related to specifically to distracted driving. It can be a challenge. Typically, there's an underlying violation as well: speed, failure to yield, a stop sign violation, other violations that are associated with dangerous driving. Sometimes we do identify distracted driving as a possibility. When we investigate fatal collisions, we always try to look at cell phone data to the best of our ability, to include getting search warrants for cell phone data, if need be, to see exactly what was happening just prior to the collision. All these things can be really important when we're doing an investigation.
That was one of my questions, is when there's a fatality, not necessarily the person that caused the fatality, how do you get them to admit if they won't? So you can do things like the search warrant to look at their phone data and stuff like that.
Sure. If we suspect that distracted driving contributed to the collision, then we do have the ability to get a search warrant in connection with the investigation, especially if it's a fatality. In the course of our investigation, to try to get a bigger picture of what was going on. You know, we owe that to everybody. You know, we owe that to the people involved. We owe it to ourselves to run out those ground balls when we're investigating those types of really serious collisions.
One question I have at the top of my mind that wasn't on the list. A lot of the vehicles now have things like emergency brakes, like my car has. I'm just waiting for it to go off at the wrong time. Do you think things like emergency brakes that will go off on themselves, or if there were to make a vehicle that was to determine distracted driving, if the eyes are not looking upwards for a certain amount of time, that maybe the brakes will go off, or even self-driving cars is going to aid, or I shouldn't say aid, but increase distracted driving accidents?
You know, I'm not sure. I know that I don't have a Tesla, but I know that they can supposedly drive you places without little to no input from the driver. I'm not so sure how I feel about that, and I'm not so sure that even if I had one, I would completely trust it. I do know that the system does want some input from you after a certain amount of time. I don't know what that time is, but people that I know who have these types of vehicles, they do tell me that you need to touch a part of the car. I think it's the steering wheel, to let the car know essentially that you're still conscious and can take over for the car if need be. I don't have any statistics on crashes that are directly related to like failures of those systems or people not paying specific attention to those systems like that. I mean, in theory, it should make things safer. But I don't know whether that's really the full picture or not.
It's computers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We've never made one that didn't glitch eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have found no new ways to crash cars, as I like to say. Human error is really the main driver of car crashes, no pun intended. We make small mistakes in driving all the time. That's really what it comes down to. Who knows how many small mistakes that we make every single day when we drive. A vast majority of those mistakes don't end up in a collision. They just don't. Maybe you cut a curb too closely, or you don't come completely to a stop, or something like that. It's those little things. But we do become complacent as we gain experience driving. We all remember what it was like to go out on your own the first day you had your driver's license when you're 16 or 17 years old. You're white knuckling it, But as time goes by and you make those small mistakes and nothing bad happens, you become so used to the driving environment that you become complacent. And that's when, driving a car becomes kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time. It kind of becomes second nature. And you forget just how dangerous the environment can be. you're driving a 4,000 pound, hunk of metal, down the street at 45 miles an hour, which is, over 80 feet per second. If you think about how fast you're really going, you take your speed and you essentially times it by 1.5. And that's how many feet per second you're going at a particular speed. So when you start thinking about feet per second, you're like, wow, so like that distance between home plate and first base is 90 feet. And when you're going essentially, 40, 45 miles an hour, you're covering that distance just like that. And so you never really think about it in those terms. Something I see that is really bad combined with distracted driving is tailgating, following too closely. I see it constantly, especially on the 347. I see it a lot. You need to give yourself that 2-second rule. It's as though people forget about the 2-second rule. It's going to take you time to perceive a problem and then react to the problem, and then for your car to slow appropriately. So the 2-second rule allows you to do that. But I see people that are like, it's the 0.5-second rule. They got their front bumper almost against the back bumper of people, and as I alluded to, it happens. I see it quite a bit on 347. People are trying to inch up so they can get over and then get in front of that car in front of them. It's impatience, but it can be devastating.
And this is the kind of information I think the three of us have talked about just in our age groups here, that when we started driving, the information that Chief Goodman just gave out is how my dad talked to me when he taught me how to drive. Kind of how Elias was taught how to drive. We had those numbers. My dad would tell me, you're driving literally a several ton killing machine. You kill somebody, you're going to lose your right to drive until you're out of my house. And I think that safe driving and driver's education and parents have become very lackadaisical in letting their teens just get the keys and hit the road because they got their license. And I also want to point out that the outreach program was never created to be a we know better and we want to teach you, but more or less we've all made mistakes, and to bring awareness, because the numbers are astronomical, not necessarily in our city, but also throughout, the state of Arizona and nationally. Is there anything you want to say about what he said?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So what are some of the biggest challenges that your department is facing in combating distracted driving out here in the city of Maricopa?
Well, we can't be everywhere. And so, when we see violations, we address them appropriately. Our population is growing, and, with that come more people and the potential for more mistakes. So, really we're trying to approach it from a multi-pronged approach. We have enforcement, and that's our people out there observing violations and then taking appropriate action. Then we have education. Part of our Governor's Office of Highway Safety grant requires us to do some public outreach and some education. We typically do those at large city events where we have a lot of people coming through, and we can give them brochures or pamphlets or reminders about driving safely. And then engineering is the third prong of what I like to call the 3 E's. And so every other week, members of the police department meet with the city's engineering team, traffic engineering team, and we talk about ways that we can engineer roadways to try to make them safer, or make changes to existing roadways to try to make them safer. Some of the roadways here in Maricopa were designed when we had less residents, and so now that we have more residents, sometimes just really small tweaks or changes to a roadway can make a huge difference in safety. And so we look at those as well, and then have conversations about what we can do, sometimes from an enforcement standpoint, while they come up with an engineering solution. So all these things come together to try to make things safer. But at the end of the day, it's each of our personal responsibility to be responsible while we're operating our vehicles on the road. If we just slow down a little, took a little extra time, be patient with one another, treat each other with dignity and respect when it comes to driving, and be civil on the road, we would be so much further along in terms of preventing accidents and dangerous driving behavior than probably anything we can do from an enforcement standpoint, really.
Let's see, what else do we have on here? Okay, this one is probably one of my favorite ones. We talked about this in the office when I came and met with you. Do you believe that stricter laws or penalties are needed to deter people from distracted driving? And what are your opinions on the sentencing for distracted drivers that have maybe the accidents have caused a fatality?
So a few complicated issues there.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you get a citation, you get hit with a fine. That's really the only thing that we have to try to change your behavior when it comes to getting a citation on the roadway. So you do something that's dangerous, you get a citation, you go pay a fine. And the hope is that by paying the fine, it'll motivate people to not engage in that driving behavior again. I'm a big fan of escalating fines. So the first offense is X, and then the second offense is X plus a little extra, and then the third offense is X plus a little extra, and maybe a little bit more extra. Or maybe you have to go take a mandatory education course, or maybe you have your driver's license suspended for a period of time. I'm not a huge fan of just a straight up suspension because that affects people's ability to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm a big believer in giving people that runway to get better every day. But I do believe in escalating fines because I do feel like getting hit in the pocketbook can be effective. In terms of penalties related to factors in terms of fatal collisions, I do think that some of the things that are avoidable should be looked at as exaggerating circumstances in cases where we have fatalities. We already have this in place for DUI as an example. So if a person is driving down the road and there's a pure accident that happens and someone is killed in a crash and no one's under the influence and there was no gross negligence involved, then that's most likely not going to be a criminal case. It's going to be a civil matter. But in cases where people make decisions to engage in bad driving behaviors, such as DUI, driving under the influence is a choice. You know before you go out and consume alcohol or smoke some marijuana and get behind the wheel of a car, those are all choices. Nobody is forcing you to drive while you're under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Also, no one's forcing you to look at your cell phone. No one's forcing you to make a call. No one's forcing you to return a text or to look at a YouTube video while you're driving. Those are conscious choices that people make, and I do believe those choices should be taken into account as exaggerating circumstances when it comes to the penalty phase of a fatal collision in which there's criminal culpability.
More so than they are now. I never knew about. There's a case that's moving through the court system locally right now that involves a fatal crash, and one of the drivers, had admitted to consuming substances at that time. And I didn't know before that case reporting about it that there was even such thing as misdemeanor manslaughter. Honestly, that's when I learned about it. And so that's like 6 months in jail maximum for a manslaughter charge. That's the kind of charges I'm thinking about. Is that enough? I mean, obviously, you just enforce the law, so that's the law that you have available to you to enforce.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my role the police department law enforcement is not engaged in the punishment phase of the criminal justice system. That's the judicial branch's job to do. And I can only hope that through our efforts as law enforcement officers and concerned community members, that legislators up in Phoenix will listen and that they will make appropriate amendments to the law to potentially stiffen penalties for people involved in these types of incidents. If it's appropriate.
If they did stiffen penalties, we would expect those instances to go down.
You know, I don't know, Elias.
Would we? 'Cause,
That's a
you know,
great
people
question,
are
right?
obviously not easily deterred. The suspended license, for example, how often are we seeing people driving with a suspended or revoked license? Constantly,
People
right?
do drive with suspended and revoked
So
licenses.
would that even, is there even good authority to believe that if we stiffen penalties that people would do it less often?
Great question.
Especially when they're complacent already.
Yeah, probably not something we have the answer to right here,
No, but
but I think it's, you know, great food for thought.
Yeah.
Right. It's great things for our community to discuss.
yeah,
Because it's not just my decision. It's not yours, and it's not yours. It's stuff for our community to come together. Because, you know, we're better together, as
Yeah.
I like to say.
yeah,
And so if, you know, the people who live here in Maricopa made a pledge to one another to drive better, think about how much better our roadways would be. You know, and I wish that we could do that. Going to continue to push for that.
mm-hmm.
Every time I talk about traffic safety, I talk about it's each of our individual responsibilities to be good to one another out on the road, and to let people in, and to not speed, and to, you know, leave yourself enough time so you're not stressed out when you're going somewhere. I'd rather you arrive early and well than not at all.
Nobody
Right.
wants that knock on the door.
Yeah, nobody wants that knock on
No.
there. Even my police officers, I tell them that it's important that you get to where you're going in an emergency. You know, you cannot help anybody if you become part of the problem.
True, police officers probably spend more time driving than anybody but a long haul trucker, just about. So I'm sure you have a lot of conversations with your department about their own driving.
I do. We monitor driving, and it's one thing I do talk about is, you know, arrive alive.
Well, you never hear about cops getting into at-fault accidents. So obviously they're pretty darn good drivers. So obviously there's a way to teach people. And to your point, that was kind of a rhetorical question about the stiffing penalties, because nobody can predict the future. Would they go up? Would they go down?
Right.
There's no way to know. But what we do know is that people can be taught to drive without
Yeah.
being distracted
They can, but, you know, tragedies do happen.
if they want to learn how.
Yeah, tragedies do happen even in the law enforcement community.
Sometimes.
You know, sometimes officers are involved in collisions that are tragic and preventable. I can think of one instance where we investigated a crash, not here in Maricopa, it was at my former agency, and we investigated the crash for an outside agency.
Mhm.
And two officers had been responding to the same call, actually, and crashed into one another. While rolling to that call, you know, hoping to get there, each of them hoping to get there quickly in order to help, and one of the officers died in the collision. And it's a horrible thing. You know, at the end of the day, you know, the lives of those officers are changed forever, and the people that they were going to help, it got delayed because of that. And so I always tell my people, be sure you get there. Be sure you get there in one piece so that we can help the people that are calling for our help. We don't want to be part of the problem. So yeah, it's a complicated issue. It sounds so simple.
It did, but
Right,
it
it's
truly
the-
can happen to anyone.
Yeah, this whole thing sounds so simple, right? It's something that we all do. We get in our cars and we drive every day.
Yeah.
Drive to work, we drive to the store, we drive to, you know, go take our kids to practice and stuff like that. But, you know, it becomes just like rote.
Mhm.
And then we get distracted and become complacent, and then, you know, a tragedy can happen. So please be careful out there. Watch out for one another. You know, watch out for people on bicycles, watch out for people walking around. I know Katie wanted me to talk a little bit about pedestrian safety.
Yeah.
We fortunately do not have a lot of pedestrian involved crashes here in Maricopa. We only had 9 last year, and that comprised less than 1% of the collisions that we investigated here in town over that year. So that's really good. We want to keep that trend going. I'd love to see those numbers go down even more. A few things we can remember when we're walking around is to assume that cars don't see us. Assume that you're invisible when you're walking, and while you're driving, take the extra second to look for bicycles and to look for pedestrians. Pedestrians get struck Most often, for instance, where driveways are, where people exit businesses onto the city street, or where you're coming out of a neighborhood onto a larger street, pedestrians cross, and sometimes we don't always see those people. At nighttime, this is a dark sky city, which is great, it's beautiful, but sometimes pedestrians can be hard to see at night. So if you're out there walking around, be sure you're not dressed in all dark clothing. Try to stay in lighted areas. Please try to cross major thoroughfares at signals. Use crosswalks. Please don't cross, mid-block in the middle of the night on John Wayne Parkway, because it's dangerous and people have a hard time seeing you. And you take something like that and combine it with distracted driving, and it's a recipe for disaster. So please be careful out there. Some people I've seen walking around with reflective vests on. That's great. I see people walking their dogs at night. They got little vests on their dog, and they're wearing a little vest just so people can see them. Just those little things you can do to make things better for everybody. So, yep, I wanted to touch on that just real briefly.
Yeah. And then, of course, if you are a pedestrian in the city of in the city of Maricopa, but really anywhere, and you do not have the means to make sure that you have gear, contact us, because we do have a way to help you with that. So we don't want you to get hit.
That's good.
Don't walk around.
Even
dark.
small flashlight.
Yeah.
Just carry something, small
Even
flashlight.
A phone has a
Yeah.
flashlight.
Turn your
Yeah.
phone flashlight
Or
on.
if nothing else, light colors versus dark colors.
Yeah. As we alluded to, almost everybody's got a cell phone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
So
all
one time
have
you
a
can take advantage of it.
flashlight.
Right? Yeah, take advantage of it.
So, well, that's some great
I
advice.
think that's
That's
I think
it
we
for
covered,
today.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
Okay.
we covered some good
Happy to
ground.
come back and talk with you guys anytime. Anytime I can get in front of folks to talk about traffic safety is a win for us. And if we just plant that little seed in somebody's head that they see their phone ringing in their car and they make a conscious decision to ignore it, that's a win.
Right.
That's a win for all of us. So those small wins make up large victories. So continue to be good to one another, drive safely, and I hope everybody has an outstanding day.
Yeah, and we do want to touch on real quick, Chief Mark is also our safety liaison for both outreach programs. And so I think out of all the faces that you see when you go to our websites, it'll be these three faces that you see the most when we're out in public, which will hopefully start happening here pretty soon. And yeah,
Cool.
anything else?
All right, guys.
Feel free
Have a good day.
to
Time.
feel free to leave comments or questions, and we will catch up with the chief later and get those answered for you as well.
Yep. If you have a question for Katie, email her, and then she can pass it on to me, and I will answer it to the best of my ability.
Take care, you guys. Be
All right,
safe
guys,
out there.
Have a good one.
Cool. All right, I can share that one too.